Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Christ the royal master leads against the foe, forward into battle, see his banners go. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Oh, for a faith that will not shrink, though pressed by every foe, that will not tremble on the brink of any earthly woe, that will not murmur or complain beneath a chastening rod, but in the hour of grief or pain will lean upon its God. A faith that shines more bright and clear when tempests rage without, that when in danger knows no fear, in darkness feels no doubt. Lord, give us such a faith as this, and then whatever may come, we'll taste and hear the hallowed bliss of an eternal home. A charge to keep I have, a God to glorify, a never-dying soul to save, and fitted for the sky, to serve the present age, my calling to fulfill. Oh, may it all my powers engage to do my Master's will. Arm me with jealous care, as in thy sight to live, and O thy servant, Lord, prepare a strict account to give. Help me to watch and pray, and on thyself rely. Assured if I my trust betray, I shall forever die. Rise up, O men of God, have done with lesser things. Give heart and mind and soul and strength to serve the King of Kings. Rise up, O men of God, his kingdom tarries long. Bring in the day of brotherhood and end the night of wrong. Rise up, O men of God, the church for you doth wait. Her strength unequal to her task, rise up and make her great. Lift high the cross of Christ, tread where his feet have trod. As brothers of the Son of Man, rise up, O men of God. Let's edify.
Good evening.
Okay, that's weird. There we go.
What's weird?
Somehow or other, my audio was completely off.
Oh,
Now, I could hear the video fine, but I couldn't hear you
interesting.
because that's the way my phone is set up. I don't know.
Okay.
See, the video plays as if it's a call, but your sound is as if it's media, as if it's a music or something. Hey, your voice is music to my ears.
La 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 la
Ooh,
la.
ouch. Ooh, it's painful. Hey, Reba.
Hello, Reba.
I just have to make you feel like O'Shea, you know. Hello, Craig.
Hello, Craig. Good to see you.
You know, for me and for several of these other regulars, there is like a 3.5, maybe 4 hour window of jam packed Bible on Monday nights. It starts at 5:30 my time, goes all the way through until 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
So it's like 4.5 hours almost, or 3.5 hours, whatever, 4.5 hours. Like, wow.
So let's get into the Book of Acts, shall we?
No,
No.
no, I'm not in there. Actually, my name is in there, but I think CJ's isn't.
Nope.
Hello, Chef. We are in Acts chapter 24. So if you want to turn in your Bibles to that point, Acts chapter 24. And hello, Craig.
My thinking is the earlier we get into the text, the more time we have to cover as much as we can.
Then Reba says, plus morning Devo, and then Bible reading with CJ. Yes, Mondays are jam packed full of Bible anyway. You know, most days are, but Mondays are packed way fuller because of the study to show yourself approved class.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know about you. I'm getting kind of full, stuffed.
We may need to work on that, get a better balance or something.
Nope.
We're heavy one day and we're light the next.
Well, we'd have more if the morning meditations was going and noontime nuggets
yeah.
and then somebody stopped doing his evening edification class on Tuesdays. He's taking a break.
It'll be back up next month for a couple weeks.
Couple weeks. Acts chapter 24. We began as an overview. We began with Paul in Caesarea, where boy, they're really noisy out there. Where Herod's judgment hall is, and where Felix is, and Paul's accusers come down to Caesarea to accuse him before the governor Felix. And they bring with them a noted orator, and I think some versions do actually call him a lawyer. I think I was thinking the ASV might. Boy, you're really noisy out there. But anyhow, a noted orator, someone who is known for his fancy speaking. And they begin by laying certain charges at the feet of Paul, or certain charges at the feet of Felix against Paul. That this is a pestilent feller, pestilent feller. Listen to me here. He's a pestilent feller. He's a mover of sedition all among the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes.
Oh yeah.
Um, and he's profaned the temple. We would have judged him, but you're that chief captain Lysias. You can just see how the sneer on Tertullus's face as he says that. Came upon us and took him away with great violence out of our hands, and commanded us all to come down and bother you. And the Jews that were around him assented. Gave said, "Yep, that's exactly the way it happened. Yep,
Yep.
listen to him, man. He's saying it. That's right on.
Right.
Perfect truth. Yes, yes, amen,
amen, brother."
And that's where we left him. So now we get to see about what Paul says about all this.
10 through 21. And we're going to see if we can get the message and get the response and finish the chapter today all in about 50 minutes. We'll see. I got high hopes.
All right, here we go.
High hopes.
Here we go. If do I have anybody in the tech? Thank you. Then Paul, after the governor had nodded to him to speak, answered, "Inasmuch as I know that you have been for many years a judge of this nation, I do more cheerfully answer for myself. Because you may ascertain that it is no more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship. And they neither found me in the temple disputing with anyone, nor inciting the crowd, either in the synagogues or in the city. Nor can they prove the things which they now accuse me. But this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets. I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept, that there will be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. This being so, I myself always strive to have a conscience without offense toward God and men. Now, after many years, I came to bring alms and offerings to my nation, in the midst of which some Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple, neither with a mob nor with tumult. They ought to have been here before you to object if they had found anything against me, or if they had anything against me. Or else let those who are here themselves say if they found any wrongdoing in me while I stood before the council, unless it is for this one statement, which I cried out, standing among them. Concerning the resurrection of the dead, I am being judged by you this day."
So if we were going to sum this section up, these 11 verses in phrase, it would be, I'm innocent, they can't prove their claims. Now, there's some more to what Paul argues in that, but basically, bird's eye view here, I'm innocent, they can't prove that that I've done anything that I'm accused of. Right? That's basically the big idea of this whole section. There's some particulars in this section, but that's the main idea, right?
Pretty much, because basically what he says, what they're charging me with is false. They're lies.
Right. So now verse 22. No, I'm kidding. We'll dig into some more. So verse 10, inasmuch as I know that you have been through many years a judge of this nation, I do the more cheerfully answer for myself. Paul said, look, I know you've done this a while, verse 10, whoever's in there. Verse 10, I know you've done this a while, so I respect you. And so he starts, because you may ascertain that it is no more than 12 days that I went up to Jerusalem to worship. So now we have the time limit between, or not time limit, but time frame between the events of 23, really the events of 21 to 24, right? 12 days. Okay. So a couple chapters have been focused on these 12 days. It's been 12 days, he said, since I went up to Jerusalem to worship, and they neither found me in the temple disputing with any, nor inciting the crowd. Look, I'm not causing any trouble, either in the synagogue or in the city. But this I confess to you. By the way, sorry. Verse 13, they can't prove anything. Their claims are nothing. But this I confess to you, according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and the prophets. What we learn here is that what they're saying is false. Here's my message. And my message is, according to what they call a sect, and it's consistent with what all the law and the prophets pointed to. We talked a little bit on Friday night on the two individuals on the road to Emmaus in Luke 24. After Jesus' resurrection, Jesus appears to them and he explains all the scriptures and the law and the prophets and Moses. And so he says, look, I'm worshiping the God of my fathers, and that would be bringing in the Jewish side, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What he's saying here is, what I'm teaching is consistent with the law and the prophets. You guys, the Jews just don't see it yet, Paul says. But what I'm giving defense for is exactly what the law and the prophets pointed to. So, this I confess to you that according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and the prophets. By the way, this also proves that the law and the prophets are pointing to the way. Paul says, I worship according to the way, the Christian way. That's what they referred to Christians. Kind of a jeering term. But we can learn that the Old Testament pointed to Christianity. Because he says, look, I worship according to this way, because I believe all things written in to the law and prophets. Levi?
We can imply that about the jeering term. But we need to be careful because it was the translator's bias that threw that capital W in there,
Where?
according to the way.
Okay.
So the grammar here is that according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the God of my fathers.
Right.
So what you're doing, and what we have a tendency to do because of that capital W is this: that according to the way which they call a sect, you see, we separate it into a prepositional phrase, or into a pause, into a separate clause, separate phrase. And that's not the way that the way that the text reads. And so, yes, it is the way, and there was those who called it the way. But the way what Paul did here is he's referring back to their argument. What argument is that?
Well, he's stirred up trouble.
Well, first
Right.
off,
And he's the ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, verse 5.
right. This is the sect that he's referring back to.
Right.
That according to the way which they call a sect, according to the sect of the Nazarenes, so I worship the God of my fathers.
Right.
Now, the funny thing, I started laughing when it dawned on me. When I was reading through it here again, as you were going through it verse by verse. Okay. We found this man a pestilent fellow. I went up to Jerusalem for the 12 days. I went up to Jerusalem for the worship. They can't have found him a pestilent fellow in those 12 days.
Right.
Okay. And a mover of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world in 12 days.
Right.
Okay, but here, neither found they me in the temple disputing with any man.
I'm not causing these divisions.
How am I being a pestilent a fellow and a mover of sedition? Not only that, how am I profaning the temple? Because I wasn't even with any man. I wasn't disputing with any man. Neither in the synagogues nor in the city. I came up 12 days ago. I came up directly to Jerusalem, and they found me purified in the temple.
Right.
Purified in the temple. Now remember the days of purification. You wash and you purify yourselves, and you wait 7 days, holding yourself in purity, and then you wash and purify and offer up another sacrifice. So you have purification rites, sacrifice, wait 7 days, purification rites, and sacrifice, and you are purified. And Acts 21 tells us that when the 7 days were almost over, that's when they nailed him. So he says, neither can they prove the things whereof they now accuse me. So every single one of these things, they can't even prove that I'm a ringleader of the sect. But he says, he offers this defense. He offers this. I freely admit that I worship after that sect.
Right.
I freely worship. I admit that I worship the way that they accuse me of. That I am a member of that sect.
Right. I'm a member of
the way which they call a sect.
Right.
Now, Ezra, can you go over the NKJV Plus and look at the word a sect, which is, by the way, heresy in the King James.
Heresy, all under heresy is indeed heresy.
There it is. Which they call a heresy, G139. A choice or option, hence a religious sect, faction, by implication, discord or contention. Let's look at Thayer. Hieresis. Act of taking capture, storm in a city, choosing choice. That is which is chosen. A body of men following their own tenets, sect or party, of the Sadducees, of the Pharisees, of the Christians. Dissensions arising from diversity of opinions and names. Isn't this fascinating? The way of dissension, the way which they called a dissension, the way which they call a choice, a heresy. Yeah. So it is not the way, but rather the way which they call a sect in the New King James.
Oh, so he's saying my pattern is after what they call a sect, right? Got it. Thank you.
So it's not, so like I'm saying, it's not, you don't pause after the way. It's one complete thought. After the way which they call a sect, so I worship the God of my fathers.
So the way I'm worshiping, they call a sect.
Right.
And I freely confess that I worship the God of my fathers. And by the way that I'm worshiping is really consistent with the Jews' own writing.
Right.
He says in verse 14, it's consistent with the prophets and the
law.
Maybe he's thinking of passages like we don't know this, but he could be thinking of passages like Isaiah 2, where there's this mountain and the city is Zion and all nations are flowing unto it. We don't know. He may be referring to He may be referring to passages like Daniel 2:44. In those days he's gonna set up a kingdom. There's a bunch of passages in there, a lot of it talk about the coming Christians and the coming movement, the thing which they call sect has been prophesied about.
Right.
And so verse 15, he says, I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept, that there will be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. So we both believe in resurrection. We both have this hope. The only difference is they don't believe the way I'm going. And this being so, because we both believe in a resurrection, I also always strive to have a good conscience without offense to God and man. So because there's a resurrection, verse 16, because that's what we agree on, both me and the Jews agree that there's gonna be a resurrection, I strive to live in good conscience toward man and God, because the implication is I want to attain to the resurrection. It's interesting to me. This is cool. I've never seen this connection before. But 14:16, I always strive to have a good conscience without offense toward God and man. He has this good conscience toward God and man because of the hope of the resurrection, whereas before he lived in good conscience in chapter 23 in verse 1 where he had no hope. So now his good conscience is based on the fact that there's going to be resurrection, and it's based in the truth. Both times Paul has had a good conscience outside of Christ and in Christ. Now the good conscience is founded in the fact that there's going to be a resurrection someday, and I'm going to be with him. And one more connection, and I saw your hand up. 1 Peter 3:20 and 21. What does the end of the verse say? Baptism does not save us through, and it's an appeal to God through the resurrection of Jesus Christ for a good conscience. That's how Paul has this good conscience, and he can say, I hope to attain that resurrection because I've gone through that resurrection and now I have the good conscience to attain it. Go ahead, Levi.
Um, a couple of things, and that is beginning in verse 15. If you notice, Paul equates his hope toward God is the same as their hope toward God. I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept. In other words, they also allow, they also have, they also cherish that
Right,
there will be a resurrection. So they both have hope in God for a resurrection. So
right,
there has to be something different than the hope of resurrection within which 16 is founded upon. What is that? You pointed out that it's hope of resurrection in Jesus Christ, but notice it says, and the New King James does it a little bit different. It says, "This being so, I myself always strive to have a conscience." What is being so? Two things, 14 and 15. What does 14 say? 14 says, I worship the God of my fathers after the way that they call a sect, believing all things which are written in the law of the prophets. Implication, they don't believe all things written in the law and the prophets.
right,
Okay. And so then you could leave out 15 alone and just say, and this being so, I herein exercise strive myself to always have a good conscience or a
right,
conscience without offense to God. And it would be true, right?
yeah,
So that's point number one. And then point number two is the hope that they have that he has in God, which they also have about the resurrection. So those two things being true is what gives Paul the impetus to strive to have a conscience without offense toward God and
right,
men, because he realizes that these men have the same hope. They hope in the resurrection of God. He just needs to teach them the law and the prophets. He just needs to teach them the way
that's cool,
that
cool,
that they need to go. And
right,
so that's why Paul says, to the Jew I became as a Jew, to the Greek as a Greek. And that's in, what is it, Second Corinthians? Um, I have
yeah,
become all things to all men.
right,
So those two, and I said that the New King James does it a bit differently, because if you look at the King James in this particular verse 16, it says there, and herein do I exercise myself to have always a good a conscience void of offense toward God and toward men, which to me says that I exercise myself in the way that they call a sect.
right,
I exercise myself in the hope of the resurrection. See, and that word herein means that he uses that pattern, he uses that belief, that faith, that hope It's the entire body of what he believes, which is what he is striving, which is why he is striving to have that conscience.
Right. So, verse 17 then. Now after many years I came to bring alms and offering to my nation. I came back to Jerusalem, in the midst of which some Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple, neither with a mob nor with tumult. By the way, I'm not causing trouble. They ought to have been here before you to object if they had anything against me. There are some Jews here, but the Jews that need to be here objecting are not here right now. The ones that say I went into the temple are not here. Or else,
Mouth of two or three
well,
witnesses.
what?
Mouth of two or three witnesses.
Yeah, like, I mean, none of these guys saw me do nothing in the temple. Like, they're not here.
Not
Verse
just that. None of these guys saw me being a pestilent fellow,
right,
mover of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world. They've not seen it.
that's
They've been
right.
sitting cloistered here in Jerusalem. They've not seen me out active in the world. No wonder he can say that they cannot prove anything which they accuse me of.
Right.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So verse 20, or else let those who are here themselves say they have found any wrongdoing. Look, Paul's saying if y'all got a court case against me and it's substantive, please prove something. I'm standing here before this council. You guys can't prove anything. I mean, we should be done here, you know? And so, unless it is for one statement which I cried out, standing among them concerning the resurrection of the dead, I'm being judged by you this day. Listen, Paul gets right to the heart of the matter. It's really not an issue of what they say, I say. The issue is the hope of the resurrection. They can't prove their claims. They're really just out to get my teaching. And so they're making all this stuff up. Here's the real issue, Felix. And Felix is intrigued by this. And we'll find out in just a minute what he does. Anything else on this section before we finish up the
No, I think
chapter?
that covered it pretty good. Those who had an issue with Paul needed to be there, and the ones that were there, he says, if you found anything against me, evil against me while I stood in council, say it. And since you
Yeah.
can't, I mean, here's what I said. Here's the extent of my testimony before this council. Touching the hope of the resurrection of the dead, I am called in question this day.
Right.
That's the one statement that I was able to utter before they tried to kill me.
So, I'll take us through a little bit if you don't mind.
Oh, you don't want me to read it, Hell?
I guess you can if you want to.
Well, that's my responsibility. You're gonna knock me and shut me out of that?
Oh, go ahead. 22 to 27. Let's finish this up here.
All righty, because we've got 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think we can do it.
But when Felix heard these things, having more accurate knowledge of the way, see, See, there it is. He adjourned the proceedings and said, "When Lysias the commander comes down, I will make a decision on your case." So he commanded the centurion to keep Paul and let him have liberty, and told him not to forbid any of his friends to provide or visit him. And after some days, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. Now, as he reasoned about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and answered, "Go away for now. When I have a convenient time, I will call for you." Meanwhile, he also hoped that money would be given him by Paul, that he might release him. Therefore he sent for him the more often and conversed with him. But after 2 years, Porcius Festus succeeded Felix, and Felix, wanting to do the Jews a favor, left Paul bound.
Alright, so, but when Felix heard these things, having more accurate knowledge of the way, he adjourned the proceedings. So we know that Felix has some prior knowledge because uh, if his knowledge came from Tertullus, he wouldn't have more accurate knowledge of the way, and he wouldn't have uh, adjourned. I mean, uh, uh, number one, he has Paul right in front of him, and he said, "Look, they can't prove anything." And apparently, I think Felix believes him. He knows about the sect. It's been everywhere. Uh, about this time, Acts 8:4 makes that clear. And Felix here's Paul, and he has knowledge of the way, so and I don't think he buys into the arguments put forth. I mean, he heard him, but he just says, uh,
Well,
I'm gonna pass the buck here.
well,
That's what he ends up doing.
look at, let's look at something here. Verse 2.
Verse 2.
Yeah, if Techie there would move us to verse 2, please. Verse 2. Thank you. We have Tertullus here, and he begins his accusation saying, "Seeing that through you we enjoy great peace and prosperity, or peace, and prosperity is being brought to this nation by your foresight." Dot 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 dot. Okay, what does that mean to you? What does it imply?
He's buttering it up.
Well, yeah, but look at it deeper. What does it mean? What does it imply in terms of Felix? Seeing that through you we enjoy great peace and prosperity is being brought to this nation by your foresight.
He is very involved in the nation.
Okay. Does that imply someone who is fresh to the governorship?
No.
Okay. Look at verse 10. Paul, after the governor had nodded or beckoned, as the King James says, to him to speak, answered, "Inasmuch as I know that you have been for many years a judge of this nation, I do the more cheerfully answer for myself." What does that imply?
He's been doing this a while. He's
been doing this a while. So if he's been doing this a while, then he's not a fresh governor to Israel. Then when we look and we read that statement in verse 22,
22.
Yes, 22. Which tells us that Felix had a more accurate knowledge of the way.
Oh, sorry.
then we know that Felix knows about the difference between the law and the way.
Right.
And we know the reason why it's called the way is because Jesus says, I am the way, the
Yeah.
truth, and the life. But anyway, so Felix's knowledge is not bound up in the Jews per se, but it's because of this having been gone on for a long time.
Yeah.
And he is familiar with all the proceedings. Or all he has to, if he's going to be a good governor, he's going to have to be knowledgeable about the different religions that are going on and the different conflicts that are being brought up.
Right.
Lysias, however, he's kind of he may not be exactly new, but he's not exactly old hat here in Jerusalem either, because he immediately assumes that Paul is an Egyptian,
Yeah.
you know, and an Egyptian, rioteer. So, so what we see here is Felix, however, is not, and he knows the way. So he knows the conflict between the jealousy that has arisen on behalf of the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin, the ruling council of the Jews, and the way. That's why he does this in a big part. He adjourns the proceedings.
Right. So he adjourns the proceedings, and he basically says, "Hey, I know what you're talking about. Uh, and I have knowledge of the way, so we're gonna drill proceedings, and Lucius, who doesn't have as much knowledge, will come and make a judgment." And uh, I mean, that's just what he does.
Well,
But
he needs Lysias down here too for another reason. Why did Lysias come in and take Paul out of their hands? You see, there's three sides to the story. There's the Jewish council side, there's Paul's side, and then there's Lysias' side.
right,
And so, as a good governor, what are you going to do? You're
yeah,
going to gather all information, are you not?
right. That's a good point. So when he comes down, I'll make a decision or get more insights. And so, verse 23, he commanded the centurions to keep Paul and let him have liberty, and told him not to forbid any of his friends to come, uh, his friends to ride for or visit him. This is nice. Paul has liberty. He didn't have that in the previous chapter, did he? He was kind of under lock and key in 23 in verse 23 verse 34.
Basically, 21 through 23, isn't it?
Uh, yeah, like chapters 21 through 23. Yeah,
Yeah.
he didn't have this liberty, and so now he has this liberty, treated like he should as a Roman citizen, by the way. Finally, getting justice
But he's
as
still not allowed to leave the palace.
right. He's not allowed to leave the palace, and so after many days, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. Here's an opportunity. Even in prison, he has liberties. He's not allowed to leave the palace. So what does he do? what he was basically caught for, he goes back to preaching. And there's still a hearing concerning the faith. So you have the governor giving his testimony in the gospel, and we really have a 3-point sermon for us in verse 25. He's reasoning with Felix and his wife about 3 things. And by the way, this will probably be a couple times outline right here about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to
You
come.
plagiarist, you.
Oh, we're all plagiarizing the Bible. That's okay. So he hears that message, and Felix says, "Go away, and when I have a convenient time, I will call for you." And that's all we know from this exchange. We don't know if Felix called him to a. Well, we know that they had other exchanges, but I'm saying we don't know if he ever got back to responding to this message. Uh, I personally think he didn't, because the reason why he's listening to Paul is, guess what? Ka-ching, ka-ching, money. Meanwhile, he also hoped that money would be given him by Paul, that he might release him, and therefore he sent for him more often and conversed with him. So basically, Felix says, "Look, I'm going to talk to this guy, and the reason why I'm talking, we don't know if they had more Bible studies or what, but the reason is I want this guy just to pay me off so I can let him go." That's what Felix wants him to. That's what Felix wants him to do. I just want to not deal with this guy anymore. Pay me handsomely and let you go. But it doesn't work. He doesn't get that opportunity for 2 years, and the uh, it doesn't happen, and the governor changes from Festus,
Felix.
excuse me, from Felix to Festus, and and Festus doesn't try and barter with Paul. He just keeps him bound in order to do the Jews a favor. He's a new guy. He wants to leave a new good impression, on the Jews. And
You
so,
better read that again.
oh, sorry, Felix wanting to do the Jews a favor with Paul bound. So, he he evidently didn't get paid off. He said, "Look, I guess you're gonna stay here. This will make me look good politically." And that leaves him in the hands of Festus for next week.
It's interesting that what we see is Felix had married a Jewess. He'd been here long enough to have taken a Jewish wife, which of course is not going to irritate the Jews. It's going to actually help cement relationships between him and the Jews. Secondly, if you notice, when Paul reasoned of righteousness, temperance, or self-control and judgment to come, Felix trembled. The Romans were not necessarily known for their temperance or their righteousness. And so, of course, it's going to cause when you're confronted with your sin, it's going to cause one of two reactions: fear, in fear that propels one to repent and change, or fear that propels one to deny and reject.
Yep.
And what do we see here? Felix is scared and he says, I'll think on it. When I have a more convenient time, I'll call for you. And as we know, there's never going to be another convenient time. There won't be. Of course, you're right when you say that he was seeking money. Could he have released him without money? Absolutely.
Yeah.
He knew just as much as everybody else that the accusations of the Jews were specious at most. They were empty. They were so unfounded that it was laughable. But rather than rile a hornet's nest, he chose to leave him bound. And you would think that after 2 years they would have just like given up hope. It was just like, okay, well, whatever. They would have moved on, but evidently they didn't.
Yeah.
It's amazing. After 2 years, the Jews were still after Paul's head.
That's
But
right.
but anyway, like you said, we leave it in Porcius Festus's hands for next week.
Well, thank you all for being here. And remember, here at CEM, we want to do three things. We want to glorify God, edify the saints, and answer any spiritual questions you may have. Thank you all. I don't have any announcements. Maybe Levi does, but we'll see you next week. See you next week for this study anyway. God bless.
You mean none of these?
No.
Well, we hope and pray that you have indeed been edified through your time with us tonight. That way, you will be walking closer to God. And that way, whether we wake to serve God tomorrow here on this earth, or whether we wake to serve God tomorrow up there in heaven, where we'll have the honor of being. For we'll see you then. God bless.